So good afternoon and good evening to our guests in Sweden. Welcome to International Conversations, a joint program of AIA Pittsburgh, which is the Western Pennsylvania chapter of the American Institute of Architects, and the Pittsburgh Platform, an incubator for ideas on health equity, urban planning, and design. We are hosting a conversation series among built environment professionals in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Stockholm, Sweden. I am Michelle Fanzo, the Executive Director of AIA Pittsburgh, and today's first session will focus on the value of design with a view of how do we create more healthy and livable cities and towns. Just some super quick housekeeping. There will be an opportunity for a Q&A towards the end, maybe the last 10 or 12 minutes. We invite attendees today to put your questions into the chat, and we will get to as many of them as we have time for. Today's 4 discussants, we have 2 from Stockholm and 2 from Pittsburgh, will be introducing themselves in a 3-minute Pechak-cha style talk. And for those not familiar with this architectural presentation style, it is fun and challenging and keeps everything moving. We thought it would be a fun way to get to know our guests today. So without further ado, let's start hearing from our architect discussants with our colleague, Anna Sunnerö in Stockholm.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I'm an architect in Sweden, and I have my own practice since 4 years ago, doing architecture mainly in Sweden. Yeah, that's me. This is where we go. Okay. Well, yeah. So living close to nature, I think, has numerous benefits for human well-being, and we know it will improve our mental and our physical health. And I wanted to show you some of our projects that's designed to make nature more accessible. And there are a lot of bridges in Pittsburgh, and this is in Ängelholm in Sweden, where they have a lot of bridges as well. This is a structure that we made together with Buro Happold, and this replaced a railway bridge, making it possible for the people to bike to an area with recreation. This house is actually a 3-in-1. It's an infill residential project, and there was an old tree on the site. And we wanted to keep the tree because we think that exposure to natural element and greenery actually can enhance our immune system and reduce inflammation and lower our blood pressure. And so we put the parking on the ground level, and then we raised the communal garden level, bringing the social spaces closer to the canopy of the tree. And the house also combines 3 different typologies of living space. From the street, there are townhouses of 3 levels, and then there's studio apartments, and then there's 1- and 2-bedroom apartments in the same structure. Also, we know through research that nature can stimulate creativity and enhance concentration and also improve our memory. And this is especially important when trying to learn new things. It also helps us foster a sense of community and promote social interaction. And this is very much the activities that we do when we go to school and educate ourselves. So this project is an extension of a university campus in the north of Sweden. We've designed 13 new buildings for 800 students and researchers. And the typology reflects traditional housing with steep roofs to shed away the heavy snowfall. But the buildings have also been placed very delicately in the forest, keeping a distance and making space for nature and trees close to the buildings. And from the street, there are house entrances leading to these activity hubs and laundry spaces, and spaces for studying and socializing and coming together.
That was fantastic, Anna. For our guests, again, who are not familiar with the Pachacha style, the slides self-advance every 20 seconds. So if you see a little bit of a disconnect between what's being said and what's being viewed, that's part of the challenging part of this presentation, but it also keeps things moving and you get to see people's personalities as they present. So thank you, Anna, for going first. Right. We'll move now to a Pittsburgh participant, Amanda Markovic of GBBN.
Hi, thank you. Everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up, great. Amanda Markovic, you can go ahead and get me started. This image is from a roundtable that my fellow panelists, Jeff and Michelle, and I organized with community leaders to talk about the importance of design equity and its impact on all aspects of our lives. This truly was a pivotal point in my career in finding my voice for what we are going to be discussing here today. At GBBN, we're constantly working to improve the well-being of those who use and live around our buildings. We know that good design is sustainable, equitable, and healthy. You cannot have any one of those without the other. I'm a principal here at GBBN, and I am the Community Development Market Design Leader. We have about 140 different employees across 5 offices: Minneapolis, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Louisville, and Beijing. And we're an award-winning research-based design firm, and I'll be sharing a few projects here. First, More Than a Place to Sleep, the Ronald McDonald House in Dayton, supports family well-being. We use the local conditions to provide moments of respite, access to nature, and joy. I'm shocked here. I've had time. And then here, this is supporting health and well-being of its residents, the neighborhood, and the city of Pittsburgh. Fifth and Dinwiddie project models a multi-pronged approach to sustainable design. It's a mixed-use, mixed-income development with high affordability. Its passive house design will save energy while increasing the comfort of its residents. And the CLP Knoxville Library here became an impediment to accessing services that are necessary for the community at a library. It was transformed into a warm and inviting destination for the diverse community. Wait for it to show up. We provided better views into and out of the library and improved access to daylight and just improved access to the really incredible resources found within the library. And it is no longer a bunker, but is now a community asset.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thank you.
Now we will cross the pond and invite Fredrik Hansson to share his thoughts.
Thank you very much. You can start the slideshow, please. So my name is Fredrik Hansson, and I'm an architect and founding partner of Okidoki Architects in Sweden, and that's me to the left. We are 50 architects, interior designers, and urban planners working in Stockholm and Gothenburg in Sweden. Now you will see some images from a couple of our projects while I reflect on the Swedish way of thinking about environment, nature, and health. And I was supposed to talk about art and architecture, but when we had a talk before this conversation about issues in Pittsburgh regarding air pollution, it struck me how little we discuss pollution and that part of environmental problems here in Sweden today. So we are sort of blessed with a clean environment, but we really share the problems with you regarding social segregation, And to give you a background and context of Swedish conditions, we are the most secularized country in the world, but we have a strong religious belief in nature, and this is a tradition living parallel to Christianity going back to before the Vikings 1,000 years ago. And maybe this is the cause of our hard regulations on pollution and high awareness of climate effects, and the cause that Greta Thunberg got interested in climate change growing up in Stockholm. We construct buildings using timber, recycle almost everything, and plant trees everywhere possible. But all this focus on the environment and nature as a sacred thing to cherish, does it make Sweden an equal place to regarding the possibilities to live a healthy life? In one aspect, you can say so because of a fairly equal distribution of green space, but does it make a difference to social and cultural problems? Maybe not. Let's give you an image of gang criminality in Sweden. Shootings, drug dealing, and murder takes place in a beautiful setting with a lush, serene landscape in neighborhoods planned close to nature, lakes and playgrounds with trees, hiking paths, and perfect air. Quite far away from what you might expect from that environment. So maybe we need to sort out the issues, the cause and effect, and start questioning what we really can achieve with planning and architecture, and what is connected to regulations, politics, and other tools for creating a better society. Maybe designers and architects need to step back, be a little bit more humble, and join forces with local communities, politicians, and other stakeholders to start co-creating from bottom up, not top down. And maybe we need to interact more with other disciplines and cultures to broaden our perspective and to learn from others. And I think that this conversation is a great example of that. And just the talk before this conversation gave me a lot of things to think about, and how we work and what we are good at and what we're not so good at.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fredrik. And our fourth participant today is Jeff Murray.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Murray with Canada Design here in Pittsburgh. I guess this slide's going to move forward, right? Yeah, there we go. So for me, ideas shape the work of design. And my work is driven by the idea of situated well-being. Both science and humanities tell us that there is no existence without a world. Our lives take place, literally. I design buildings for science, and I use a lot of ideas from the humanities. Architecture is an art and a science, and John Dewey, the American philosopher, said art and science are both ways of making sense of the world. I use design to humanize science buildings. We have to avoid being overly deterministic with what we can do with design, just like Fredrik just said. You know, there's a lot of mistakes made in the early 20th century architectural reformers. There are many types of well-being. I've listed some here. Situated well-being is just one of those. Maslow was too hierarchical. So he talked about, in my view, things like joy are just as important as safety. We're living in an epidemic of loneliness, so belonging, dignity, and agency matter as much as health equity. Big challenge for design is connecting these fuzzy concepts about well-being to concrete elements in the built environment. This 4-level network of situated well-being, which I know you can't read at this scale, is an initial attempt to make some of those connections. My firm, Canada Design, we have a design ethos called living centered design, and it expands this situated well-being in another way. We look not only at individual well-being, but also organizational, communal, societal, and environmental well-being, all of which can be in conflict. This example here is a research facility designed to get researchers to collaborate more by putting their labs, offices, and conference rooms on different legs of the plan to increase movement through the center, thus affording belonging and agency at both the organizational and the individual level. Our clients for this project told us that they wanted manufacturing space to be as nice as the executive offices. When they moved in, it empowered the workers, improved productivity, and reduced turnover, enhancing business outcomes. Suzanne Langer said feelings holistically combine sensory information, emotions, memories, and ideas. Martin Heidegger recognized that both people and places have moods. Our outer world and our inner world are much more entangled than we realized. And this is why situated well-being matters.
Thanks, Jeff. So many ideas in your 3 minutes. I can see this conversation could go in so many directions. So let me invite our participants to start with this idea of environmental health equity, right? Which is the equal right for everybody to be able to live in a healthy environment. What do architects and architecture have to do with environmental health equity? Anybody can jump in.
Well, I think it's important for us to recognize, and again, I think Fredrik and I both talked about it a little bit, recognize that there are real limits what we can do, that built environment is, 99% invisible, and it's already always operating in our background. So we know that it can be a powerful impact, but we don't really notice it. But we have to also recognize that it's not the only impact on our well-being. There's so many other types or aspects of well-being. As Fredrik said, you can design this beautiful place and you can still have shootings and gang wars, and things can happen there. But we know there's an impact. And I think as designers, we can do, what designers do, which is to try to make those places work well, to make them beautiful, and to afford the opportunity for people to take advantage of the features and well-being aspects of those places.
Other thoughts?
I think that one way of sort of handling the issue is that I think is by collaboration, because then you force yourself to sort of not being so deterministic or being omnipotent, or being like the image of the genius, like the architect has connecting to God and having like the perfect world. So I think that we have to have more of a platform thinking of a multidisciplinary. And this is, sort of, we talk about this all the time, but we sort of tend to get back to the old role of being like the architect with a big A, telling the world how it should be. And it's hard for us, but what do you think about that working in? To me, that's how it is in Sweden. What do you think about it in your work?
I'll start by saying that there's definitely more of a push to get architects engaged at a community level. We are making that push. I think it depends on the client that we have, whether we're successful or not. But we definitely need to be more engaged before a project begins in a given community, to help understand what those needs are, what is going to make for a successful project. It does mean taking off the cape and getting a little dirty. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like to say design is a team sport, Fredrik. And again, the stakeholders that we work with are builders who build things, the governmental agencies that are involved. Everything is all part of it. And I think that we have to understand buildings are so complex that so I couldn't agree more that collaboration is critical. And I know in the kinds of science buildings that I work on, the researchers are very aware of the fact that their laboratories are going to either make them more successful or less successful, depending on the design. So they are very much engaged in in the process of designing their laboratories and their facilities. And I think, agreeing with Amanda, that we should be expanding that we have to have deeper engagement with communities at all scales to make sure that we're looking in a broad way at all the issues.
And communities are starting to, ask for that, demand for it. And so, it's causing us all to step up.
I think historically there has been a lot of mistakes done, and I think it's, as you said, it's important to come together and make sure that we don't repeat history as much as we tend to do. I'm just thinking of in the matter of health equity, of all the infrastructure that we have planned since the 60s all over the world, and how badly it actually affects us humans, and how we're gonna, we have a big issue to solve and to work with for the future. And that's, I think, one of the hardest things with our profession is that what we do has such a long-term effect, and we plan and we build things that will last for more than 100 years, and it's difficult to have everything top-notch for such a long time. It's almost impossible.
But I see a very positive thing is that I think that our clients here in Sweden, we work in Europe as well, in Slovakia and so on, and they are very open for more, what do you say, collaborative way of thinking together, and not having the sort of being more humble to the issues. And so I see the shift in like the late 5 years. Something is happening in Sweden. I think maybe it's a generation thing or something, or inspired by working in other sectors or something. But what do you think about that thing? Do you see a shift in the process of designing thing? You've been around, Jeff, for a while. What do you see is something happening today that?
Well, I think a big issue, big issue we're seeing again is that we need to think about designing for change. As Anna's pointing out, you can't predict what things are going to be like 100 years from now, but we know that designing buildings, because they're so so difficult with all the embodied carbon that goes into a building, that we want it to last for a long time to minimize its environmental impact. But we know that, change is going to be significant. We can't even see 6 months ahead what's going to happen. And I think the pandemic has shocked us all into recognizing how fragile everything can be and how quickly things can change. So designing buildings, not only for the immediate needs, but understanding how they change and evolve over time and how they accommodate future uses is also, I think, a critical issue for us.
It seems there'd be a real tension between designing buildings, as Anna said, that last up to 100 years or longer, and Jeff, what you just said, which is designing for change, and sometimes 6 months later things are different, right? As architects, how do you address that tension?
I think we talk about flexibility, and then generic buildings, or regenerative buildings, which is the ability of a building to change for different purposes. or the ability of a building to withstand or stay the same and still being used. And that's two different. That's, as you said, it's two different aspects and different. It could be different solutions in different situations, I would say. But I think, for example, like a school, they've been the same or the same things has been going on in the school for many years. But if you have an office building or other types of building, it might change that something else is going to be, the building will be used for something else. But there is a challenge, and I think that's also very much the same in different parts of the world, that the laws are restricting what you can do with a building, and that's a challenge, I think, for the future. How can we be more flexible with those buildings?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You mentioned the school, and I know we just finished a school in outside of Pittsburgh for Seneca Valley that was recognized as one of the best inventions of 2022 by Time Magazine. And it was weird to think of a building as being an invention, but it goes back to this idea of collaboration, because we designed that school very carefully, working with a wide array of stakeholders from the school. But also, more importantly, we also worked with the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh. And the idea behind that school and engaging the Children's Museum was recognizing that kids love to learn in museums where they can touch things and do things. And the question we put on ourselves was, how could we design a building that both work like a children's museum, but also work like a school? And of course, we could never do something like that unless we had an administration, a faculty, a staff, a parent group that would fully supported kind of radically rethinking how kids learn and designing a facility that could support those new ways of learning. So I think that, and the thing that we know designing into that building was significant ability for that building to change over time as new technologies and new ways of engaging students arose.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about a building and that it is intended to last, depending on the element we're looking at, 50 years, 100 years, we really need to start considering circular economy and how we design for deconstruction. So, know what trades, don't glue anything, don't weld anything, use screws, not nails. So the elements that are intended to last a really long time, they can be reutilized in a different way.
And I think what you're into, Amanda, is, I mean, we're in such a big shift now. It's like our perception of time has changed, because we have to sort of see ourselves as a link in time and not just as the forefront of something. It's like, I think it's a very, like the previous, like the modernistic or the that kind of perception that you are sort of in the forefront of something, that we have to think that we are sort of just part of history, and that I think that makes something else. I think that the architecture will change a lot. I mean, the aesthetics will change, because you're not seeing yourself as inventing something new. You're just sort of maybe putting together things in a new way, but you know that the content will shift, the structure might be there, or you will resemble it or something. So I think that we will sort of have to relearn architecture in a new way, but maybe also in a way that it was learned before, like the modernistic turn, because it was sort of, you had a perspective of time that we are sort of reconnecting to. I think I think something is big is happening, but we're in the middle of it. Let's see how it will evolve.
Yeah.
I will say one aspect that I think the traditional, one of the things that we noticed, the buildings that have lasted the longest across the world have been buildings that have been beloved. You know, so buildings that people love to be in, you know, and again, to some degree, this goes opposite of making things generic. It's really, you know, Falling Water's been around for a long time because people love it, and a lot of money's been put into keeping it there, even though, you know, even though when it was originally built, it had some technical challenges. So I think that aspect, and that's why I talk about art and science, the aspects of collaboration, all that are very important, but I think we have to be seeking something that makes us feel good, something that attracts us, and something that, you know, makes us, you know, engages us in joy and transcendence and some of those other higher level sort of human needs that are also part of the built environment and what it can provide for people.
So the title of today's talk was The Value of Design. And as I listened to all of you talking about a time of change and working more and listening more to communities in which you're working, and this idea that we're actually in the middle of something new. And of course, when you're in the middle of new, it's hard to know exactly what's going on. So with all of this shifting, is the role of the architect also shifting or evolving in some way?
Yeah, I think it is. Go ahead. Go ahead on.
No, but I think it is. I think, as you said before, it's more of conducting or collaboration with a lot of people, that's what I think, bringing people together and work together to solve issues. It's more of our job than to bring our own ideas to the table and argue for them, because the world is much more complex and the buildings are much more complex, and it's getting even worse the more disciplines involved in every building for every year, I would say, and it's exciting, and I like, because you learn a lot. You learn from all the other disciplines, and it's a good time to be an architect, but it's different, and for sure for the future there are this big responsibility of bringing down the climate or the carbon footprint on our agenda, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, we are now needing to be advocates for our communities, advocates for the environment, and it means doing some hard work to get there to really improve the lives of the people that we're working with.
But I think it's harder times for architects, or the opposite, that in a couple of years in Sweden, there's been a lot of that the architects have protected themselves from being sort of creative or doing something that's with the themes that you're into, Jeff, like meaningfulness, belongings, the local situation, and etc. Instead, working with like rationality and structure and other things that's more into like what I think that maybe AI can work with. So it's more of a humanistic part that we sort of forgot, that we have to sort of get back to architecture, I think, because otherwise it won't be relevant. And that's what we see in the discussion here in Sweden, that there are big like discussion about like classical architecture. And I think that has to do with the lack of meaningfulness, and it's generic in a bad way. It looks the same everywhere, if you're in Pittsburgh, in Sweden, or whatever. So like that is really a hard thing to design something very unique, local, that feels very meaningful. it is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I mean, buildings are so much more complicated now than they used to be. The sustainability has probably increased complexity. You know, we're big supporters of sustainable design, but it's increased the complexity of buildings, you know, tenfold, 100-fold, and so has technology. All the new technologies that are incorporated in buildings, the way we do things. So our fees haven't gotten any bigger, but we're doing a lot more design work because of the increased complexity of the buildings. And I think that makes architecture today much more of a challenge. And again, you know, I think it's really good that we are more comfortably moving towards seeing design as a team sport. Making buildings is really hard. Building them is really hard. You know, we always count on having great contractors and builders to work with. So because it's so important to making those projects work. And again, an owner who has vision, who's willing, you know, again, I think another distinction I always say is maybe in the old days, architects had patrons, you know, they worked for rich people, right? Today we have clients. We work for communities. We've worked for companies. We work for groups, and they're not interested in making you know, big fancy monuments, but they're interested in beauty and functionality, all those other things. So I do think it's changing a lot, and I embrace it. It's changing in the right ways, but it's not easy.
One of our audience members has a question that goes right to what you said, Jeff. So I'm going to read this to people. How can we encourage clients, meaning specific project clients, but also the wider public, to care about environmental equity and the value that design brings to the health of humans and to the world? What are some of the practical ways that you can be advocates? And have any of you had clients where you've been able to advocate and really educate and advance a project with one of your clients?
Yeah, we have. Go ahead, Fredrik.
Yeah, I think it's happening all the time, but to do that, you have to sort of learn how to be the client and know that side of it, because we work as well as developers in a couple of projects, and we finance and build and construct and design and everything and sell it on the market. And by that, learning or that side of architecture and the part of how hard it is to actually build something, and that's one way of sort of, because we really want to change architecture, but we see that architecture, we don't need to know the other side. So that's our solution to trying to learn and doing better architecture.
Yeah, every client's different, and so I think there's different levers for each client. You know, I know a lot. I worked with some pretty hard-headed, you know, corporate clients who are very bottom line CFO types. But when you talk to them about brand, they say, "Oh my God, the brand is the most valuable thing we have." And then you explain to them that, you know, the buildings are a part of your brand. So your brand is going to suffer if your buildings look like crap, you know, and all of a sudden they completely change their viewpoint and start to recognize that they're investing in their brand the same way they would, you know, a commercial or some other thing that they're doing, some PR program. So, and I think, you know, we have to pull those levers. The other thing I think we have to recognize as architects, and again, we get a bad rap in the industry, some maybe somewhat deserved, but we have to decouple, you know, what I say, decouple beauty from luxury. And I don't mean, I mean beauty in the broadest sense, is we have to recognize that we can make beautiful things, great things, without spending more money. So, you know, and you know, we've seen real estate, hard-headed real estate developers who say, well, I want this building to be very green and at a high level of LEED certification because it's going to increase the value of the property. There's enough documentation now to show that when you do a green building, that the value of that building holds longer and it tends to go up. So I think if money is the lever, then we have to work on ROI. If brand is a lever, then we have to talk about buildings in that way. If there are people like that last, picture I showed, and it's a project in Pittsburgh where the client, the CEO said, I want people to work for us because we have the best manufacturing space in all of Pittsburgh. And he was committed to that and committed to making that work and committing to spend as much per square foot in the manufacturing space as he spent in the executive offices. So very interesting where the levers are. I think we have to work with different clients different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of ways we've been able to achieve it. I think understanding your client is number one, and knowing what those levers are. And for some, it is the bottom line, and there is a business case for it. Absolutely. While others, where we start, I say we start with the end in mind, like what is the impact you want to make? And it just kind of reframes the story for them, thinking about at the last day of construction, what is the impact this building is going to have? What do you want it to have? And that's been successful for us as well.
I think that there are some, experience is sometimes very hard to explain or talk to someone about, and sometimes it's very hard for clients to really visualize or understand what does it mean with the ceiling height, for example, or what does it mean with the window or the noise from the outside, or the possibility to have glass all the way down to the floor. What will that, how will you experience that? That's very hard for most clients, I think, to really understand. And what we've done is that we try to give them a physical experience to actually go places where we can show this and they can experience it themselves, which is often very useful and brings the discussion to another level, instead of trying with saying this same thing. This could actually turn things around, doing study trips or visit places where you can experience what you're trying to achieve.
Another one of our attendees kind of drills down deeper on this idea of collaborating, right, with others. And she asked, do you think there's an opportunity for designers to collaborate directly with healthcare systems and healthcare providers, which might not be the people you normally directly work with, to promote health equity? How could you do that?
That would be interesting, I think. I think there will be a lot to benefit from that, absolutely, to have those things working together, reaching the same goal. I don't know how you would do that, though.
I mean, I think that healthcare providers are talking more and more about social determinants of health, and I think still wrapping their heads around what that will ultimately mean. I think we've seen a couple of examples of that here in Pittsburgh. So just lean into that topic, I think, and how it connects to how their services connect to so many elements of our well-being and how they can have an impact there.
Yeah, our firm has a consulting group called Blue Cottage that actually consults with healthcare organizations early on in the process and after the building's done to help them use the building more effectively. And basically expands. Oh, I've got something's going on in the background.
Sorry, somebody needs to mute their background, please. Thanks.
And I think that you know, I think Amanda talked about this before, but it's important for us to get more engaged in the full life cycle of the building and how it's operated. You know, we can see ourselves almost in the future as being curators of existing buildings, understanding how they operate. We're doing a research program right now with a healthcare organization, just looking at circadian lighting, artificial lighting, understanding moving from blue light to yellow light and things like that during the day, and studying the impacts on their workers, you know, on the nurses and doctors and people in those healthcare, and whether doing these kind of circadian lighting through the day can affect and help them and to be able to sleep better, to have better, you know, better health outcomes for those work individuals, because we saw through the pandemic how damaging and how hard things were on the healthcare workers themselves.
Fredrik, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, my reflection is that I think that we should be sort of trust our common sense a lot more, because it's like we are always trying to tell that this is good because of statistics and everything. So like there's a science project in Gothenburg right now. They are researching if trees are good for health, and to me that's, I mean, we know that we don't have to sort of we could be more dumber and straightforward, I think, in the design process, and together with the clients, talking like in a more direct way, because I mean, if you use your common sense, everybody will say the same thing, like you said with the like with the workers. Obviously it's better if you have a good environment for everyone. You will get a better productivity and so on. So I think we should be more direct in the solutions regarding to health and maybe just go with our gut feelings more, and not hiding behind or trying to sort of rationalize by science and things like that. But it's not like I'm critical towards science, but we somehow get stuck in like a logic where you have to sort of, you cannot trust just your feelings or your ideas with the clients, and work in a relation, more in a relation, like you have said, Anna, looking at something, going to something, that's sort of a relation. It's working on your relationship with the clients, right? So it's not just about looking at something, it's about trust and about talking about what you see and what you think about a question. It's not just rationality. That's what my point is.
Mm-hmm. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I will invite the audience. If you have a question, please put it into the chat. And one thing I'd like to cover, because we have this opportunity of two very distinct regions, right? People from two regions. What would you like to learn from the other? What would Pittsburgh like to learn from Stockholm, and Stockholm learn maybe from Pittsburgh?
And the work that you showed was very beautiful, in the integration with the nature into the work that you did. I just came back from Vancouver, and it's very much a part of the built environment language there as well. And was sad to hear how it has not impacted, you know, kind of crime and such. And so, you know, what do you see as having an impact there?
Yeah, and to me, it's the question, but the other way around, because what we see is that our social sort of welfare system is sort of on a decline, and we see a lot of problems, and we really need to sort of learn from US and from other countries that has had these kind of problems for a while, and how to tackle them. And it's really hard, because it's local and it's unique, and it has about relations, not, and architecture is one part, and urban planning and so on. So, and that would be so interesting to learn more from, to get like real cases to see what has been successful and what has not been. It's really hard to find it from here in Sweden, the cases.
You know, we always think of European cities as older than American cities, and in so many ways better, just because they've gone through more generations of trying stuff, seeing what works, getting rid of what doesn't work, and putting it back together. So I think there's always a lot for us to learn here in America from Europe, and again to understand that range of social issues that you've talked about, Fredrik. You know, I think and I think seeking the ability to do something that is regional and has a character that increases, you know, what is a Stockholm character versus a Pittsburgh character? That's a question for me.
Mm.
I think there are a lot of similarities, and I think as the world becomes smaller, the similarities just increases. I mean, both Stockholm and Pittsburgh are surrounded by water, and that's always a challenge to link the different areas and making it possible for people to move and not have. How do you connect the segregated areas or open them up? And but as Fredrik said, we now have violence in all areas of our cities, and that's new to Sweden. We don't know how to tackle it. So I think that we have new challenges, and some of it that you have experienced in the US prior to us. I know in Denmark they have a big discussion about tearing houses or social segregated areas, tearing structures down. I don't know if you have any experience of that in the US, or if that's something that you do.
There's probably a whole hour discussion about social housing as the European term, and the history we've had, the ups and downs, shall we say, we've had with that in America. I don't know if Amanda or Jeff, you had anything you'd like to respond to about that.
I showed a slide of buildings being blown up. You know, when we think we know what we're doing and get too cocky and change things radically from how they've been, doesn't always lead to good outcomes.
We have a question from an audience member about, and this is really a big deal in America, and I'm curious what this is like in Stockholm and in Sweden in general, parking. Parking is a huge issue. So this is from Steve Mercedes, who is a developer locally, and he said that it's always a big challenge to integrate parking in a way without losing the important connection to nature and the surroundings. Placemaking, right, is so important. How do you do that with a big parking demand, or does Sweden not have as maybe much of a big parking demand as we do?
Yeah, we have. We were in a project where we focused on parking, and the issue is the same. One thing that's very interesting here in Sweden, that it's the cost for the parking is hidden into the project. So if you live in a block or something, you pay for the cost of digging parking down or underneath or in a parking garage, etc. even if you don't have a car. So one way that we have talked about this, to see, you have to see what you pay for. That's one part to get like a market functioning. So, and then changing the system from that's been in Sweden, it's been of more of a, it's not from demand, but it's from regulations that you have to have like 0.5 parking lots per apartment or something. Instead of, if you want to have 0, if you think that the market is there, if you want to pay for 1, please do. But then you have to do it in this way. So we are sort of in this shift. You know, we are from. I work in Gothenburg, and Volvo comes from Gothenburg. So it's like we love cars in Gothenburg. So it's a big problem. But I think that to begin with, we have to see the cost for the construction if someone really pays for it, and that's not the issue here, and that's not the case here in Sweden at all.
No, I was going to say that my view is that it's a little bit the parking issue is big in Sweden, but it's different than in the US, because here it's more the demand for parking is more from the government or for getting a building permit, not from the people actually living in the houses. They don't have as many cars as they used to have. So we have an issue with old regulation demanding a lot of parking to our projects. And now we have a lot of developers who doesn't want to build them, and nobody wants to rent them, or the people moving into the buildings, they don't want the parking. So yeah, that's...
You know, there's a great podcast I just heard from 99% Invisible on parking in LA. Steve, you should listen to that. It's really interesting because of it showed this progression through several decades of parking continuously increasing, and then all the unintended consequences. And there's a strong argument to say that the parking regulations that started back in the, I think I would say in the 40s and 50s in LA actually led to the massive housing problem they have today, because the parking kept going up and it kept driving this, as you say, Fredrik, it kept driving the cost of housing up. Developers wouldn't build housing because it just didn't pencil out. And you end up with massive housing shortages. You end up with these sort of dingbat type housing units where you walk down the street and all you look into is parking parked underneath a building. There's like no entrance anywhere, very strange buildings. So there's a lot of negative outcomes that comes from getting over obsessed with adding more and more parking requirements. And, you know, I think to what you said, Anna, we have to move away from the government regulations and really look at the unintended consequences of some of these regulations and whether it's giving more bad than good.
We have about a minute left, so I'm going to ask for like a flash round, a really, really quick question here. But as you look forward, and I'm thinking also of the younger architects and landscape architects and urban planners coming up, what would be your, phrase or one sentence of advice about why the value of design matters to these issues we've been talking about today?
I think it's hard to tell the future, but as we mentioned before, the climate is changing, and the air will change, and it's going to get warmer, and all of those things will affect our health and us as humans. So I think that's going to be a big challenge ahead, and I'm sure there will be a lot of young people digging into those issues and solving those questions and problems with what they have.
And hopefully they will be humble and learn from history and not repeating it. So that's what I hope.
Yeah, I think the built environment it's always going to have an impact on people's lives. It's hidden, but it's significant. And if they want to make an impact, being in design is a great idea.
Yep, agreed. I mean, just be engaged, advocate for good design. It does impact everyone's lives. And just step away a little bit from the processes that you're involved with, and know that this is important work, and the checklists are there, but it's important for us to build a better future.
That's a wonderful note to say thank you to everybody that participated today, whether you were a speaker or you were an attendee. We will be having 2 more sessions, one on June 7th and one on June 20th. And you can register just like you did for this one, and we will send you a link the day before. We hope to see many of you again. The next session will be a mix of landscape architects and architects. And once again, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.